So working with text in Affinity Publisher is fairly similar to what you'd expect from Adobe InDesign, which is where I came from when I first came to this application. Text wrapping was a big thing that I needed in any kind of print publishing platform. So this video will talk about just working with text in general. So we'll talk about text wrapping, maybe typing on a path, columns, establishing columns and modifying columns, etc. So what we'll do first is talk about text wrapping, and you need to think in terms of the object the text is wrapping around. So if say you place an image in a document, as shown here, nothing's really wrapping to it at this point, and the image itself is overlaying the text below, as you can see. So there's two columns here, which I've set up actually in our text columns panel to be two columns by default. So I'll get to the columns bit later, but for now let's talk about text wrapping. So what I want to do is maybe stylize this photo a bit and add a border radius on the top or the bottom right. So I'll set just a defined default setting of 25% in the contextual toolbar. If you don't see these, it's because this is checked. You'll want to uncheck that and then modify these settings accordingly to what you see fit. And one gotcha is that sometimes when you think of text wrapping, you might select the text itself, trying to wrap it around something else. But in theory, you need to select the object it's wrapping around to adjust the text wrapping settings. So to get to those settings, you can go into the toolbar here and edit with these. So what you want to do is essentially start with this one to start. And inside this panel is going to be different styles of wrapping. And the one we'll look for mostly is going to be the tight one, and then from that you can modify and see which one works best for your application. Jumping literally jumps down past the object. Square defines an actual bounding box based on the bounding box of the object. Tight's going to wrap literally to the curve of the object. Inside's going to actually wrap to the inside of a shape if you were to type it in such a way, and the edge does the same thing as tight in essence, but it does go to the inside of the object. What we want for this is going to be the tight, and you can adjust just the largest side to wrap to or both sides. I tend to just use both sides in typical design. From there you can see how tight that text is though, so it's doing what we want. It's just not necessarily the cushioning we need. So what I will do is increase the right padding a bit. And I'm using inches for my units of measurement. You might use millimeters or something of a metric unit. That's totally fine. So I'll type in like 0.2 there. We can do some on the bottom too, just to kind of make it consistent. Top we don't necessarily need in this case because there's no text there. Same for the left, since it's affixated to the left of the page itself. So with that, we have a bounding text wrap, which is great. So we can move this object at any time, and you'll see it just conform to those boundaries, which is perfect. So that's in a nutshell what text wrapping. You just want to place an object onto your page, modify those settings. If you ever want to redo those settings, you can just edit the wrap outline, which just kind of adjusts the actual wrapping, which you can do manually, which can come into play if you need a custom shape or form that the text needs to wrap around. Or you can just go back into this panel and edit those settings at will. Great. So establishing text in a column format, you can create text with the text frame tool. With that, you can just go ahead and create a bounding box of the text. I'll just do the full page here, and we'll insert some filler text. Go to text, insert, and actually right here, insert filler text. So that's going to be the full margin, the full width of the page, which is great. But what if we wanted to modify that and make it a little more balanced and less succinct? And to do that, you can come up to the contextual toolbar again and modify how many columns you want. So I'll bump this up to say 3, kind of a newspaper layout. And then with that done, we can go into our text toolbar, or we'll go to View, Studio, and then look for the text frame panel. Open that up, and then within this panel you can adjust a lot of settings. You'll see each of your actual columns defined here. So however many you have, this will just grow. And you can adjust the width of each one accordingly, which is great. So you can customize and have a really abstract kind of grid going on. So maybe this first column's 3 inches or so. And you'll see it pushes everything else to the right. So you'll actually want to modify that bounding box to be less. And then you'll see things update in real time. Not necessarily something I want to do. So maybe I'll backtrack back to our 1.647 inches. And then just scale this so that it's all consistent from each column. And then with that, you can adjust the gutter, which is great too. So if you want smaller width between each column, that's totally possible. So I'll just do a 1/4 inch. So there we have it. Resize that a little bit. And so now we have perfect 2-inch columns with 1/4 inch gutters. And you can just hit this balance column if you want it to be something of that nature too. So 4 does the same thing. Everything updates in real time. Now, if you want padding, say you have a fill behind these, which you can totally do. Say we use a black, but we want the text to be white. We can select the text by double clicking that and then go up to the contextual toolbar again, select white. And then look how tight that text is to that bounding box. So I want to adjust that a bit. And that's where this insets property comes in. So with the chain selected, which is typically what you'd probably do, it gets the same width and height around each side. You can just adjust the cushioning between that box and the text itself, which allows for some breathing room. It makes it definitely more legible. So that's kind of a quick take on the text frame tool and the columns. Of course, you can adjust vertical alignment and everything else in between here. This can also wrap to objects. So if you want to wrap a column to an object, I'll copy this over. Yeah, it looks like it's stuck behind because of the fill, but realistically I wouldn't normally have a fill on something like this. So I'm going to go and find that view again to disable it. I accidentally closed it. I'll just set the fill to none and our text back to black, or just our base black. In fact, I'll use our text styles, which you have predefined here. So now we have our body set up and our actual content is wrapping to this image as well. So we can do the same kind of thing over here, which is great. So you see how dynamic that is. That's so much less time spent trying to tweak text to fit around a object itself. And it's where text is one of my favorite features in this program so far. Okay, so what about typing on a path? Let's add one more page, and we'll just add it after our current page 7, which is our last page. So it's just a new leaf here. Okay, so typing on a path is fairly straightforward. You'll need the pen tool or a pencil tool to create a vector stroke. And in essence, this path is going to be what defines where your text lands in the end. So maybe you create just an off abstract shape that you want to append text to. So with this quick shape I've created with the pen tool, I'll leave be. I'll hit back to the arrow tool, and then we'll adjust this accordingly, maybe shrink it to match our margins. Then I'll come down to the artistic text tool. You'll hover over this bounding box, and you'll see on the curve itself, you'll get a new cursor that has this T with the slash kind of thing going on. And when you click, it'll actually initiate a path of which you can type on. So we can begin typing. And you'll notice it contorts to the actual path, which is great. It's what we're after. So if you ever wanted to adjust the path, you can double click into it and then adjust these handles on it, and that kind of denotes where the text ends and begins on the path. So you'll see if I move this green, it'll jump down to the bottom there, but we want it to actually be just on the top portion, and you can just pick and choose where that lives. You might have to adjust the path itself each time because it's going to be a little finicky to get right, but once you do, it is worthwhile. So that's how you create text on a path, and that's the same really for any Affinity app. You can do that in Affinity Photo and Designer as well. That's a look at text and working with text in Affinity Photo. You'll see there's tons of options here. In another video, I talk about text styles and table of contents. I think that's suited for its own thing, but text itself and wrapping it especially is very important to a tool like Affinity Publisher. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was useful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.